The following is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.
Hi, everybody, and a very pleasant good evening to you wherever you may be. The F&M Schaefer Brewing Company raises a glass of ice-cold Schaefer in your honor, and Lucky Strikes blowing smoke rings at you from the studios of Comfortably Zoned Radio. And once again, it's time for Dodgers baseball, a tale of two cities from Brooklyn to Los Angeles. I'm your host, Peter Trunk. My co-host is Ron Rabinovitz, who is on assignment tonight. And our guest, my guest tonight, is a favorite son of the show, super Dodger fan and close friend, Bill Hall. Bill, how are you, my man?
I'm doing good, Peter. It's always better when I get to talk about the Dodgers and to talk with you. So looking forward to this program.
That is great. That's great. Well, you know what? We got caught off of first base and picked off a couple of times in the last 3 or 4 months. And,
yeah.
In that we devoted the show a little bit too strongly to the left coast Dodgers part, and I've been trying to bend backwards to Brooklyn, and we did it the last couple of weeks. We've been 100% Brooklyn, and tonight we're going to be 100% Brooklyn. We're going to talk about a fellow who is in the Hall of Fame and who played for a few seasons in the same outfield as Casey Stengel. And I'm going to allow you. This is your baby. I'm going to let you tell the listening audience who we're going to be talking about. Yeah, I want you to bring the whole subject up. I'm just going to leave it up to you. Go ahead, Bill.
A pleasure, Peter. Tonight we're talking about Zach Wheat. His full name, Zachariah Davis Wheat. He was only a Brooklyn Dodger for the first few years of his career. For most of his career, he was a Brooklyn Robin because the team, of course, as we've talked about, was known primarily as the Robins during the tenure of Wilbert Robinson as manager, though the Dodger name did not fade out entirely. So who is this guy? There was an article in the Los Angeles Times a couple of years ago talking about the fact that actually the Los Angeles Dodgers have done a pretty good job of honoring the legacy of the Boys of Summer, but two early Dodger greats, Dazzy Vance, who we talked about on another program, and now Zach Wheat, Sterling Hall of Famers who had their primes. For Wheat, it was the teens and 20s, and Vance was the 20s. They're largely forgotten. But who is this guy, Zach Wheat? All-time franchise leader still in hits, doubles, triples, RBI, and total bases. But that
great.
Gives you a numerical picture.
Those are great statistics. Could you say that? Would you be so kind as to say that again? He is the all-time Dodger leader in
hits, doubles, triples, RBI, and total bases.
Amazing.
Yeah, but how about, let me throw at you a quote that I think gives you the measure of the man as a person. And I'm glad you mentioned Casey Stengel, because not only did they play in the same Brooklyn outfield together for a few seasons, did you know they were both from Missouri, and actually the Dodgers signed Casey Stengel on Zach Wheat's recommendation.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah. And so when this is, again, according to his SABR, Society of American Baseball Research biography, written by Eric Enders. So what did Casey think about Zach Wheat? Again, I'm pulling up a quote. This appeared in his obituary from the New York Times when he passed away at the age of 82. In 1965, Casey Stengel summed Wheat up this way, quote, one of the grandest guys ever to wear a baseball uniform, one of the greatest batting teachers I have seen, one of the truest pals a man ever had, and one of the kindest men God ever created. man, if you came to the end of your life and somebody said that's something heartfelt and wonderful about you, wouldn't you feel like it was a life well lived?
I certainly would, but, I have something to tell you that while you were quoting that, you were like 50%, you were 50% breaking up, like you were underwater.
I am sorry.
That's okay.
Do it again.
I wonder if
Yeah.
you would mind terribly repeating that.
Not at all, and I am sorry about the troubles. It is a really stormy night here on the Oregon coast, and perhaps that's playing heck with my cell coverage. But again, this is Casey Stengel talking about Zach Wheat in 1965. One of the grandest guys ever to wear a baseball uniform, one of the greatest batting teachers I have seen, one of the truest pals a man ever had, and one of the kindest men God ever created.
Wow.
Yeah, that is one sweet tribute.
It sure is.
Yep.
Holy cow.
Yep. And, also from the Ender's biography, they said he wasn't a great base stealer, but really for his era, his prime, he was probably as close to a 5-tool hitter as the game saw in those years.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Another thing I find interesting about him, he was one of those guys who spanned the dead ball era and the lively ball era. He came up in the early teens, had his first prime years, when you still had the dead ball, and having something like a .312 batting average made you a star. But then he was still thriving into what was his 30s, the 1920s, and, right up to the very end of his career. What was it? I was looking for the stat. The year that he hit .375 when he was in his, yeah.
1925.
Yeah,
25?
But 1925, 37 years old, .359 batting average, 221 hits, .541 slugging percentage, 125 runs scored. Really, one of the best seasons ever by a 37-year-old.
Wow.
Yeah.
The only other season that I can remember off the top of my head, with no computer in front of me, would be the 38-year-old Ted Williams.
Yes.
Yes. When he hit
when
380.
he won. Yeah. And that was, as people said, if he had just had a little more speed left in those legs, he probably could have managed 400 for the second time in his career. And just imagine that. Doing that in the late 50s, yeah. But impressive enough. Now, Zach Wheat, I think a fascinating personal story, born on a family farm 60 miles out of Kansas City, really still wild frontier. I mean, just think about it. 6 years before Zach Wheat was born, Jesse James was murdered not far away. How's that for a little perspective?
That's
he
great.
was, yeah. I mean, this is a guy who lived well into the 20th century, but was born on the wild frontier. He was one of 3 sons. All 3 of them played professional baseball. He was the eldest. His middle brother, Mac, if anybody researches the Dodgers of the teens, he was a catcher who spent 5 years with Brooklyn. One of our friends in our Brooklyn Dodger Facebook groups posted a picture of Mac Wheat, and he had a catcher's glove and asked, well, when did Zach Wheat catch? And somebody said, nope, that's not Zach. That's his brother, Mac.
Mm-hmm.
His other brother never made it out of the minors, but, obviously a family with a lot of natural athletic talent. On his father's side, descended from the early Puritans, and his mother was a full-blooded Cherokee.
Wow.
So that's an interesting lineage. And there was a 1917 Baseball magazine article. You got to remember, this was the era when Chief Bender of the Philadelphia Athletics was one of the best pitchers in the game. Jim Thorpe, although wasn't it the curveball that really kept the inability to hit the curveball that kept Jim Thorpe from being more of a success in the majors, but certainly one of the greatest athletes this country has ever produced.
Kept more than Jim Thorpe from being. It kept the curveball kept more than Jim Thorpe.
Yes, that's very true.
Yours truly included.
That's very true. But this 1917 Baseball magazine article, just showing what a different world it was 100 years ago. The article said, suggesting that his Indian blood, his Native American blood, was a major factor in his success. They wrote, the lithe muscles, the panther-like motions of the Indian are his by divine right. You won't see that in a sports article today.
No, you won't.
No. So Zach's father died when he was 16, and the family moved into Kansas City. And basically, the reason he was playing semi-pro ball, and the reason he set out to become a professional was because the family was pretty much destitute. He had a couple of, so-so years in the minors, and if you pull up on Baseball Reference or other sources, you look at some very unimpressive minor league averages, and he said years later, somebody said, Zach, what happened there? And he said he was slowed down by malaria for a couple of years.
Oh, my God.
Yeah. But in August of 1909, this is when $1,200 was a heck of a lot of money. But the Dodgers made a very wise investment by paying Mobile of the Southern Association $1,200 for Zach Wheat's contract. And that September, he got into 26 games, batted .304. So, again, the newspapers, this is just hard to fathom a whole different era. One of the newspapers wrote this. I kind of shake my head, but and I'm sure you will too. He is an Indian, but you would hardly guess it except from his dark complexion. He is a very fine fellow and a quiet and refined gentleman. Yeah. Is that damning with faint praise or exactly what?
Some of my best friends are Indians, right?
Yeah, really. But again, the reference to him being quiet in the other reading I did about him, in preparation for Zach Week, say that 3 times fast. In the group was, it came up again and again. One person said, he said hello, season, goodbye again, and unlike some players that.
You're breaking up and you went out.
Oh, okay. Well, unlike some players who had a reputation of being quiet because they were sort of standoffish and mean, everybody said, nope, Zach Wheat was a truly nice man. He just, wasn't the kind to put himself forward, have a lot to say. So, but a true gentleman, and he just kept grinding out those great averages and great results year after year in an era, the teens, when the home run was still a rarity in those pre-Babe Ruth years. He had plenty of doubles and triples and was among the leaders in home runs. And of course, it was in 1912 that he got Brooklyn into signing his old friend Casey Stengel. So, and then they were together for 7.
I lost you again, Bill. Lost you, Bill. it seems as if the Storms out in Oregon are still playing havoc with Bill Hall's reception on his cell phone. We'll see what we can do.
Hey, are you still there, friend?
I'm still here. Yes, I am.
Are we still rolling?
We're still rolling.
Well, I'm sorry. I don't know why the call dropped. I was reading the quote from Casey Stengel, another glowing quote from Casey Stengel about Zach Wheat. He said, I never knew him to refuse help to another player, were he a Dodger or even a Giant.
Wow. Holy
Talk
cow.
about a nice guy. You know, probably the average Brooklyn player approached by help for a Giant, he'd probably, if he was lucky, wouldn't you think he'd spit on his spikes and maybe kick him? But Zach would probably, just said, oh, sure. He said he never really saw him angry. He never heard him use cuss words. And remember, this is back when baseball was not a game of college gentlemen. This was still, a game for guys from the wrong side of the tracks.
Yeah, the rough and tumble crowd.
Exactly. So, but even as nice a guy as Zach Wheat did not avoid controversy. He became the captain of the Robins in 1919, and unfortunately he and Wilbert Robinson ended up running afoul of each other. For somehow Robinson became convinced that Wheat was maneuvering behind his back to become manager. Now, one of the things that puzzled me, I did a little bit of research. There was a cover of Baseball magazine in 1925 in which he was listed as Dodger manager, or maybe it was Zach Wheat. And I thought, and again, I looked into the official records. Zach Wheat, he was never officially credited with being manager of the Dodgers. However, they say, that he had been appointed player manager by Ed McKeever, who became team president after Charlie Ebbets died. But then remember, McKeever died 2 weeks after Ebbett's funeral. And,
yeah, he caught a cold. Right. Yeah.
Yep, he caught a cold at Charlie Ebbets' funeral. So they said that was when Robinson stepped out of the front office where he'd been kicked upstairs and resumed his managerial duties.
Right.
So fascinating story, I think. Kind of sad, but
yes. I did read somewhere that although Zach Wheat is not credited, as you just said, with ever being officially a Dodger manager, that in fact he was in charge as the field manager for 10 to 14 games that season. But then, like you said, almost immediately, Uncle Wilbert was put back in as the dugout manager, and Wheat doesn't even have for instance, he doesn't have a lifetime one-loss record as a manager.
Correct.
If he managed 10 games and the team won 5 and lost 5, he's not listed anywhere by being Dodger manager with a one-loss record of 5-5, let's say, or whatever. Yeah. They just never gave him the. And by the way, while we're on this is one of my pet peeves, and being a baseball nerd and a Brooklyn Dodger nerd, it always comes up. The difference between the Brooklyn Robins and the Brooklyn Dodgers. The Brooklyn Robins, this is my opinion, and it's been 100 years have passed. So my opinion might not count so heavily, but they were always the Dodgers. The press called them the Robins because of Uncle Wilbert Robinson was their
Mm-hmm.
manager. So they call them the Robins, and sometimes they even refer to them as the Flock.
Right. Nickname for Robin.
But I've seen the 1916 World Series program and the 1920 World Series program, and they both say Brooklyn Dodgers on the program.
Right. Well, I think you're aware, Peter, but maybe not everybody listening would know that in that era, really the baseball team nicknames were so much more fluid than they were now, that as a legal entity, it was not the Brooklyn Dodgers or the Brooklyn Robins. It was simply Brooklyn National League Baseball Club Incorporated.
That's exactly what it was. Yes. Well,
yeah, and I believe it wasn't until 1932 they legally adopted Dodgers, and they put it to the vote of a group of sports writers, I believe, and they considered the good old traditional name Dodgers, the one that had stuck around since the 1890s. And the runner-up choice, interesting, the team was never referred to by it, was Kings, for Kings County, the county which Brooklyn is comprised, So, yeah, it's an interesting point. And also, mentioning the death of Charles Ebbets, that started, I think you would agree, the whole ongoing inter ownership battles that sent the team into almost a 15-year period of decline, near bankruptcy on the field. That really was the era when the Dodgers became the joke of the National League and all of baseball, and not until Larry McPhail was brought in to right the ship did they
definite boys.
Yeah, become, that era, of course, is kind of symbolized by three men on third base, which didn't actually happen, or Babe Herman being hit on the head with a fly ball, again, which didn't happen. It bounced off his shoulder. But, so kind of a sad era.
But the old joke was really funny, where the guy jumps in a cab, the backseat of a cab in Brooklyn, and the cabbie says, "I got the ball game on the radio." He says, "The Dodgers have three men on base," and the guy says, "Which base?"
Yep. So many great Dodger moments happened in cabs. I mean, like Willard Mullen, the creator of the Brooklyn Bum, forever the symbol of the team. What was it? I think he caught a cab outside of Ebbets Field, and he happened to mention to the cabbie that he had been at the game that afternoon, and the cabbie said, "How'd them bums do today anyway?" And, inspiration was born, and that was the moment the Brooklyn Bum was born. You gotta love it.
I do love it.
And something else I remember coming across in my research, I think this was a little anecdote from the New Yorker magazine, and it talked about there were cabbies, if, that they would pull over and say, "I got the Dodger game on the radio, do you mind?" And if the potential fare said, "Yes, I do mind," they'd say, "Find another cab, Mac."
Yeah, right.
That helps show you what a religion the Dodgers were in Brooklyn.
They certainly were.
Let's get back to Zach Wheat, shall we?
Yes, we shall. Let's go.
At the close of the 1927 season, the Dodgers basically decided he was done, and he was unconditionally released. But, that was not casting aside a spare part, a worn out part. They said it was really they could have traded him, but they wanted him to be able to negotiate his own deal with whoever he chose. And even though he was an old guy, yes, the Giants tried to sign him up. The Yankees wanted him. The Senators wanted him. Not bad for an old guy. But finally, Connie Mack signed him up for $15,000, and in 1927, in about halftime duty, he batted .324 in his very last major league season.
Mm-hmm.
And it's sad, except for I think 1 year as a Dodger coach in the early 30s, basically at that, Zach Wheat was out of baseball at that point. And years later, a reporter asked him, well, gee, why didn't you stay in the game? And he said, nobody asked me to. Isn't that sad? A guy who was a sterling player, had a reputation. I mean, we've got Casey Stengel's word for it, that he was a great batting teacher, and nobody asked him to stick around.
Wow.
Sad.
That's perplexing.
Yep. Even after the Athletics let him go, he went on to Minneapolis in the top minors, American Association, and he batted .309 there. But he batted, but he suffered a badly bruised heel, and at that point, 39 years old, he decided it was time to retire.
Right.
When he retired is, again, some career ranking, 2,884 career Major League hits, 10th on the all-time list.
Wow.
So he had, like a lot of guys after baseball, now, of course, they walk away set for life, even with a rather mediocre career. But he farmed for a few years, but then unfortunately the Great Depression forced him to sell the farm. The family moved back into Kansas City. Like Freddie Fitzsimmons, like Yogi Berra, like Gil Hodges, he ran a bowling alley for a while. Then he became a patrolman for the Kansas City Police Department. Yeah. And sadly, in 1936, he was involved in a high-speed pursuit of a fugitive, crashed his patrol car. He was in the hospital for 5 months. Fractured skull, dislocated shoulder, 15 broken ribs. But then he had a very bad incident, had a very good outcome for the remainder of his life, because even after he got out of the hospital, you're in that kind of an accident, you're pretty badly banged up. So the family went to what they thought was going to be temporarily to a resort at Sunrise Beach, Missouri, on the shores of the Ozarks. Well, he ended up spending the rest of his life there, because so many players of that era. He was an avid hunter, and he opened a large hunting and fishing resort, and it was certainly a popular place. He finally got into the Hall of Fame. Oh, get this, here's something. This may be, I'm not certain, but you check me if you know otherwise. He may be the only man who was voted into the Baseball Hall of Fame twice. How?
That I don't know. That I don't know about.
This was another one when I was reading up on him. I said, Well, 1957, the Veterans Committee votes him in. And then they did a big oopsie, because at the time, the rule was to be elected by the Veterans Committee, you had to be retired for 30 years, and he wasn't quite there. Back then, the Veterans Committee only met every other year, so the next time they met in 1959, they unanimously voted him in again. So,
how do you like that?
Yeah, twice elected to the Hall of Fame. And
so
I love the...
When he was finally inducted, if my math is correct, he was as old as I am now. If he was born in 88 and he was inducted in 59, does that make him 71?
He had not yet turned 71, so he was 70.
All right, there you go. Okay.
And I love the quote. This sounds like a genuinely modest man again, who was again really kind. The reporters asked him, and he said, "This makes me feel mighty proud. I feel a little younger too." Yeah. Sadly, his wife passed away a few months after he was inducted into the Hall of Fame. But Zach Wheat lived on all the way until March of 1972. And again, here is a comment that certainly would not fly in these more enlightened times, but not long before his passing, someone asked him if he had any advice for young people who aspired to become Major League Baseball players. And he said, yes, tell them to learn to chew tobacco. Yeah, how about that? But, a wonderful man, a wonderful baseball career, and it sounds like a life well lived. That is the story of Zach Wheat.
Amazing. He wasn't a very large man. He batted left-handed. He batted left-handed and he threw right-handed, not unlike Duke Snyder. But he was less than 6 feet tall and just about 170 pounds.
Yeah,
he was not a large. He was not a large guy. And all of these years later, with all the great people that played for the Dodgers in their history, including Los Angeles and, of course, our beloved Brooklyn. Yep. He leads in so many categories. I think you said he leads in hits, doubles, triples, and extra bases. That's incredible. RBI.
No, total base.
And
RBI.
Total base. Right.
Yeah, one more statistic about his rather small frame that said most of his injury problems were around his ankles and feet because he wore size 5 shoes.
Man.
Yeah, I doubt if you see many men in the majors today who are wearing a size 5.
You know what? That's amazing. Who's the fella? Hack Wilson.
Oh yeah, another
who drove
guy,
in 191 runs one year and played for the Dodgers, by the way.
Yeah,
for the Dodgers, not long time, but he did play for the Dodgers. He had a size 5 shoe also.
That's right, but at least on Wheat it was all proportional. You look at full-length pictures of Hack Wilson and you say, why does this huge barrel of a man have these tiny feet? But, Zach Wheat, I guess, we're talking Zach and Hack, and you're going to confuse me, my friend. But anyway, at least with Zach Wheat, it's proportional to his total frame.
Yeah.
So.
Right.
Quite a story.
I saw
there.
A picture that you posted. I was interested to see all of the pictures that you posted of Zach Wheat when you turned it into Zach Wheat Week. Not easy to say. Zach Wheat Week.
Yeah. Earlier I said
one of the pictures was of Zach batting in an old timers game.
Yeah.
And he had swung around, and you could see number 4 on his back.
And another guy would do that one.
When Zach Wheat played, there were no numbers on the Dodger uniforms. The Dodger uniforms only got numbers in 1932.
Right.
So he was wearing either Babe Herman's jersey at the time, or I think it was too early for Duke Snyder, but it could have been.
Yeah.
Interesting stuff, though. Very interesting. Very interesting.
Yeah, and old Hank DeBerry, who was known as Dazzy Vance's favorite catcher, was behind the plate, and you could see the photographers on the field. I haven't been able to find anybody who was exactly when that practice was prohibited, but, it's surprising a lot of people to know that in the early decades of baseball, news photographers were actually allowed on the field, and I presume they're at their own risk.
Very close to the batters, too.
Oh,
amazing.
Yeah.
It's amazing for 2 reasons to me. It's amazing for 2 reasons. First reason is you could get killed by a line drive. The second reason would be when you see pictures of, just for instance, I'll just take someone off the top of my head, Joe DiMaggio batting.
Yep.
and there's like 5 guys lying on the ground 8 feet away from him with cameras pointed at him. Didn't that take away from his concentration?
I would think so, except, I don't know, you think of what you see in movies, and sometimes, I know you've been lucky enough to talk to a few retired major leaguers, and so have I, and I've heard more than once how part of being the professional, you just learn to tune out all the distractions, and when you're at the plate, the only thing you see is the pitcher 60 feet, 6 inches away, and your concentration on that pitch coming in is so total. I can't imagine it, whether it be, 32,000 at Ebbets Field or 60,000 at Yankee Stadium, all the other fielders, but, it just took total concentration to have the kind of success at the major league level that Zach Wheat and those other guys did.
Sure.
Yeah.
Amazing stuff. Very interesting stuff and amazing stuff. Another great Brooklyn Dodgers story. That's a wonderful story. Zach Wheat, another Hall of Famer, and you did Dazzy Vance before this. So the 2 guys that are in the Hall of Fame that hardly get talked about. Let's be honest. They hardly get talked about. It's few and far between when, even if you get together with another avid Brooklyn Dodger fan, another crazy fan just like yourself or myself, one of the first things they'll talk about will be Campanella or Newcomb or Snyder or whomever. Even Eddie Basinski or something, they'll talk about, Al
Pete
Lopez.
or Dolph Camilli.
Right.
Yeah.
But they, very, very weird. They never bring up Dazzy Vance. They never bring up Zach Wheat. 2 of the greatest, absolute, pure, great baseball players, not only in the history of the Brooklyn Dodgers, but in the history of the National League and baseball itself.
Oh,
incredible stuff.
Indeed.
Incredible stuff. Well,
hey, you know what I'm going to treat myself to after the program's done? A nice chocolate egg cream. You read my mind, my friend.
I read your mind.
Yep, I got some seltzer already in the fridge, the nice whole milk, a fresh bottle of Fox's You Bet chocolate syrup that came in the mail today.
That was my next question. Do you have the correct
you own
syrup?
You and others taught me well. If it doesn't have Fox's You Bet, it is not a true egg cream.
It is not a true egg cream without Fox's You Bet.
Nope, it's just a pale imitation.
That's great. That's great. All right, listen. Enjoy your egg cream. Thanks for coming on with me.
And hey, can I make a pitch?
I'm sorry you missed Ron Rabinovitz, my partner. He was on assignment tonight. But you did a credible job, a very nice job. I love hearing about Zach Wheat. It was just as interesting, if not even more interesting than Dazzy Vance for whatever reason or reasons. And I thank you for coming on the show. I thank you for spending time with the Comfortably Zone Radio program. And I can't wait till our next time. And there will be a next time. There will be a next time.
Before. Yep.
And
I'm sorry.
I don't want to let the cat out of the bag because that's not right to do. But
who we're going to feature?
Captain, my captain.
Oh, Captain, my captain. But as I told you off air, this was not the best of days for me. Otherwise, like for instance, 2 hours in the dentist's chair this afternoon, and you asked me, Bill, are you sure you're up to this? And I said, nope, definitely. All throughout the day, I was looking at this challenging day personally, but those happen in all our lives. I kept thinking, I get to talk Zach Wheat with Peter Trump tonight, so that's going to be a good capstone to the day.
It was a great capstone, and thank you very much. And we're going to talk real soon again, okay? Thank you, Bill, and good night.
Good night, Peter.